It's past midnight and the kitchen light is the only thing still awake in the house. The dishwasher hums softly, a low mechanical sigh in the background. She's standing barefoot on the cold tiles, one hand resting on the counter, the other holding a glass of water she's already forgotten to drink. Her hair is tied up, there's a faint mascara shadow under her eyes, and her shoulders have that permanent slope that comes from carrying too much for too long. On the table there's a half-finished school project, tomorrow's work laptop bag, an unopened bill, and a small pile of things no one ever quite puts away. It's the kind of mess that doesn't scream disaster. It just quietly says, someone is always holding this together. Tonight, that someone is her. Again. From the living room, she can still hear the echo of his laugh from an hour ago, when he was watching something on his phone. They barely spoke. Not because they fought, but because there was nothing left in the tank to say. She walked past him, he glanced up, they exchanged a neutral hey, and a tired half-smile, like neighbors in an elevator. Once upon a time, that same couch had been their island. Movie nights, inside jokes, feet tangled together under a blanket. Now it's just furniture. She checks the time on the microwave. 12:38 a.m. technically, everything is fine. The kids are asleep. No one slammed a door. No one said anything cruel. They pay their bills, they show up for work, they show up for family events. If you looked at them from the outside, you'd say they're a stable, modern couple. She's the definition of strong and independent. She earns her own money, she organizes the house, she handles the emotional storms of everyone around her. She doesn't lean on anyone. She rarely cries. She'll tell you straight-faced, I can handle it. What you wouldn't see, unless you were standing where she's standing right now, is the quiet numbness in her chest. The part of her that used to reach out, text him funny memes, ask about his day, pick little fights just so they could make up and feel close, that part has gone very still. Not dead, just shut behind a heavy door. She hasn't stopped loving him entirely. She's just stopped expecting him to really see her. Here's the brutal truth no one puts on those strong, independent woman quotes on social media. Independence can be a beautiful expression of self-respect, but it can also be a shield built out of disappointment. At some point, she didn't become distant because she was bored or selfish. She became distant because being open felt like walking around without skin. Every time she tried to share a need, it turned into a lecture, a misunderstanding, or a fight. Every time she softened, she felt stupid afterward for believing this time would be different. So she adapted. She turned down the volume on her needs. She told herself, I don't want to be that dramatic woman. I don't want to nag. I don't want to depend on anyone. The world around her applauds this. You're so strong. You don't need a man. You're your own rock. But in the middle of the night, in this quiet kitchen, that strength feels less like power and more like a cage she locked herself into. And on his side, he's lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying how long it's been since they laughed for no reason, since she touched him with that old softness, since her eyes lit up just because he walked into the room. He doesn't have the language for it, but he can feel it. There's a glass wall between them now. She's not yelling. She's not begging. She's not asking for more. She's just unreachable. The part no one warns you about is this. There's a very fine line between a woman becoming healthily self-reliant and a woman quietly shutting her heart down. Cross that line enough times, and one day you wake up next to someone who looks like your partner, shares your bills, shares your bed, but emotionally feels further away than a stranger on a late-night train. If you pull the camera back from that midnight kitchen, what you see is not just one bad evening. You see a pattern that has been building quietly for years. It almost never starts with drama. It starts with good intentions. She tells herself, I want to be the kind of woman who can stand on her own feet. I don't want to nag. I don't want to be needy. I don't want to be the problem. Maybe she watched people mock women who complain too much or cry too easily. Maybe she saw her own mother begging for attention and getting nothing. So she makes a promise to herself, I will be strong. I will handle it. First, that strength is genuine and healthy. She keeps her old friendships. She has her own goals. She doesn't panic if he doesn't text back for a few hours. When he's stressed, she gives him space. When he forgets something small, she shrugs it off. She's flexible. She tells herself, relationships aren't perfect, I can deal with this. On the surface, it looks like harmony. Under the surface, a small emotional notebook starts to fill up. Every time she swallows a hurt instead of naming it, another line goes into that notebook. Every time she stays up late finishing things that were supposed to be shared, another line. Every time she gathers her courage to say, I need you here, and here's some version of you're overreacting. Can we not do this now? Or I'm tired, let it go, another line. She doesn't slam the notebook shut. She just keeps writing in it, quietly. This is how the resentment loop is born. She gives a little more, expresses a little less. He relaxes into the comfort of believing she's fine. She's strong. She's got it. The more she silently compensates, the less he sees the weight she's carrying. The less he sees, the more alone she feels. The more alone she feels, the more she tells herself, I'll just handle it myself. On the outside, that sentence sounds like independence. On the inside, it often means, I don't trust that you will show up, so I will stop placing my heart in your hands. At some point, independence stops being a free choice and turns into armor. There is a big difference between healthy independence and defensive independence. Healthy independence says, I know I can stand alone, and I still choose to lean on you, because I trust you. Defensive independence says, I will never lean on you again, because leaning on you has felt like falling. From far away, those two can look almost identical. Up close, one keeps the door of connection open, the other quietly bolts it from the inside. This isn't just about personality. It's about old wiring. Maybe as a child she learned that adults were unreliable, so she became the mini-adult in the family. Maybe she was the friend everyone confided in, but no one really checked on. Maybe she learned that being the helper, the listener, the stable one was the only way to be valued. By the time she reaches adulthood, she doesn't even realize that her default mode is, I carry it. I fix it. I don't bother anyone with my pain. When that pattern meets a partner who isn't fluent in emotional language, the script practically writes itself. On his side, there is usually a different script running. Many men are raised with a simple rule. Feelings are either problems to fix or noise to mute. When she shares something vulnerable, he might feel attacked, judged, or helpless. He hears, you're not enough. His shame gets triggered. Shame rarely says, thank you for this feedback. Shame says, defend yourself. Explain yourself. Shut this down. So instead of leaning in, he might argue, minimize, or disappear into work, games, or his phone. He's not waking up thinking, how can I hurt her today? He's usually thinking, how do I stop feeling like I'm failing? His language for care is often action-based. Paying bills, fixing the car, doing his job. Her language for care is often emotional. Listening, noticing, checking in. So you end up with two emotional languages constantly missing each other. She says, I feel alone, hoping he will step closer. He hears, you're a bad partner, and steps back. She experiences that step back as evidence that she really is alone, and her armor gets thicker. He experiences that armor as coldness or rejection, and retreats further into whatever feels safe. The original wound might have been small. The loop that grows around it is not. The dynamic becomes a quiet, ongoing tug-of-war between vulnerability and self-protection. She tests the waters, doesn't feel met, and pulls back. He senses the pullback, feels judged or unwanted, and withdraws. The emotional bank account between them stops getting deposits and slowly dries up. There are no explosions, no big scenes. Just less and less warmth, fewer and fewer bids for connection. Until one day the distance feels normal. And if you asked her, have you shut down? She might genuinely say, no, I've just grown up. I'm realistic now. It doesn't feel like punishment to her. It feels like wisdom. But from the perspective of the relationship, that wisdom is costing both of them the very thing they once promised each other, a place to be fully seen and held. That's why, if you really want to understand what's happening here, you can't just look at the surface of her calm, competent exterior. To really understand what's happening here, you have to step inside her world for a moment. Not the world people see on social media, the polished version where she's handling her job, her kids, her body, her home, but the private backstage where her thoughts actually live. On a normal Tuesday, she might wake up already feeling behind. Before she even gets out of bed, her brain is running a silent to-do list like a crowded browser with too many tabs open. Work deadlines. The kids' project due next week. Her mother's health. The argument from last Saturday that never really got resolved. The mental note to schedule a dentist appointment. They worry that they haven't had a real, warm conversation in weeks. She hasn't even brushed her teeth yet, and her emotional system is already loaded. She moves through the day on autopilot, answering messages, solving problems, smoothing over mistakes, being on. She might receive compliments. "You're amazing, I don't know how you do it all. You're so strong, you're always so composed." Part of her likes it, because who doesn't want to be seen as capable? Another part of her feels a small, bitter sting. No one ever says, "You must be exhausted, how can I support you?" The world keeps taking and admiring, but rarely offering to carry the weight. In the relationship, the pattern is similar. When there's a crisis, she steps up. When something falls through the cracks, she quietly fills it. If he forgets a date, she remembers. If he doesn't notice she's struggling, she convinces herself, "It's fine, I'll manage." Her love language may be emotional presence. Talking, sharing, checking in. But somewhere along the way, she realized that every time she tried to open that door, she ended up feeling more alone, not less. So, slowly, she rearranged the furniture of her inner world. The space where intimacy used to live got turned into a storage room for unexpressed feelings. One of her biggest fears is being too much. Too emotional, too demanding, too sensitive. She has likely internalized a quiet rule: if I show how much I actually need, people will pull away. That fear doesn't come from nowhere. Maybe early boyfriends mocked her when she cried. Maybe her family's rule was, "We don't talk about problems, we just get on with it." Maybe when she did collapse once, no one came. So she taught herself a harsh lesson: I can only rely on myself. It's a powerful belief. It's also a lonely one. That fear of being too much often sits right next to another fear: being not enough. Not pretty enough, not interesting enough, not successful enough, not young enough. Social media, friends' stories, the way people talk about relationships, it all feeds this quiet anxiety that she could be replaced. So what does she do? She doubles down on control. She controls her emotions so she doesn't scare him away. She controls the house, the schedule, the routine so nothing falls apart. She controls her own vulnerability, because the idea of being open and then rejected feels unbearable. From the inside, this controlled distance feels like maturity. She may say to herself, "I've grown. I don't cry over small things anymore. I don't depend on anyone. I'm my own source of stability." And there is truth there. She has grown strong. But strength built purely on self-protection has a side effect. It doesn't leave much space for mess, softness, or the kind of chaotic, honest conversations where real intimacy grows. Imagine her at dinner. The kids are loud, everyone is tired. She notices he's checked out, scrolling his phone between bites. 5 years ago, she would have said, "Hey, can you put that away and talk to me? I've barely seen you all day." Now she takes a breath, swallows the sentence, and tells herself, "Forget it, no point starting something." Outwardly, she looks totally calm. Inside, another small piece of trust quietly breaks off and sinks. Later that night, she might lie in bed and replay the day. There's a part of her that misses the version of herself who used to reach out, who used to plan surprise dates, send flirty messages, tease him in the kitchen. That girl feels very far away now, almost like a character in a movie she watched years ago. She might even blame herself. Maybe I changed. Maybe I'm the cold one now. But if you look closely, you'd see that coldness is not her nature, it's her armor. It formed layer by layer over many moments where warmth didn't feel safe or welcome. There's also the burnout of emotional labor. She doesn't just do tasks, she carries everyone's feelings. She anticipates moods, avoids triggers, minimizes conflict. She worries about how the kids experience the tension at home. She notices when he's stressed and gives him space, even when she is starving for connection herself. At some point, her system hits a limit. She stops offering emotional extras because she is running on fumes. From the outside, that looks like detachment. From the inside, it feels like survival mode. And here's another uncomfortable part. Sometimes, that coldness is also quiet revenge. Not dramatic, not planned, but a slow, unconscious way of saying, if you didn't value my warmth, you don't deserve it anymore. She may not admit this to herself, but there can be a small satisfaction in not needing him, in showing him she can run her life fine without his emotional presence. It's a way of regaining power after years of feeling weaker in the relationship. But like all revenge, even soft, quiet revenge, it costs her too. Because every time she withholds her authentic self, she moves further away from the kind of love she actually wants. If you could sit inside her chest, you'd feel a mix of grief, frustration, and a numb kind of peace. Grief for the closeness that used to exist, frustration that talking about it never seemed to change anything, and numb peace from finally stopping the effort. She might tell herself, we're okay. We don't fight. We're stable. But there's a chair at their emotional dinner table that's empty. The chair where curiosity, playfulness, and emotional risk used to sit. What she rarely says out loud is this: I wish I could trust that if I opened up again, you wouldn't drop me. She wishes she could put down the armor and still feel respected. She wishes she could ask for support without feeling like she's failing her own image of being strong. She wishes she didn't have to choose between self-respect and emotional closeness. She doesn't want to be unreachable. She just doesn't know how to be reachable without feeling exposed and alone again. Now let's switch the camera angle for a moment and talk directly to the men who are watching this, feeling confused, hurt, or even quietly angry. Because from your side, what you see and what you feel often doesn't match what she's actually experiencing inside. You might be thinking, I don't get it. I thought women wanted independence. I give her space. I don't control her. I support her career, her hobbies. And now it feels like I'm being punished for exactly that. She used to want to talk to me all the time, and now everything feels professional, efficient, like she's my colleague or my roommate, not my partner. You remember the early days when she would send good morning messages, ask about your day, laugh at your jokes, get upset if you didn't respond. Back then, you sometimes felt overwhelmed by how much emotion there was. Now, the silence is louder, and you're not sure when things flipped. Here's the first translation you need. When she becomes cold and unreachable, it's rarely a spontaneous decision. It's usually the final stage of a long process where she felt unheard, unseen, or alone in the relationship. To you, it might look like she suddenly decided to stop caring. In her inner language, what she's really saying is, I cared so much for so long that I ran out of places to put the pain. Her withdrawal is not proof that she never loved you. It's often proof that she loved you intensely and didn't know how to keep loving you without losing herself. When she says, I'm fine, don't worry, most of the time she's not fine. In her language, I'm fine can mean, I don't feel safe enough to tell you how bad it actually is, or I'm tired of explaining myself, or every time I tried to show you this before, I ended up feeling worse. She may genuinely want to avoid another argument where she's painted as overreacting. So she chooses peace on the surface, war inside. To you, the surface peace feels like things are okay. To her, it feels like a quiet funeral for the parts of herself that used to speak. When she stops bringing up problems, that is not a sign that problems are gone. For a lot of women, silence is not acceptance, it's resignation. If she used to nag, and now she has gone quiet, that silence is telling you, I don't believe this will change, so I'd rather carry it alone than keep begging. You might feel relieved that the complaints have decreased, but the emotional distance you feel at night, the sense that she's living in her own world, that's the cost of that silence. When she takes over everything, planning, organizing, remembering, smoothing over, she may look hyper-competent, but inside she's often screaming, why am I doing all of this alone? You might interpret her control as, she likes things her way, she doesn't want my help, she criticizes me when I try, so I stepped back. In her language, the control often started as, I asked for help, it didn't come or came with criticism, so it feels safer to do it myself than to feel disappointed again. By the time you see her as the general manager of the relationship or the family, she may already feel like your unpaid emotional employee, not your partner. When she doesn't reach for you physically anymore, it's easy to take it personally. She's not attracted to me. Attraction can play a role, but often the deeper translation is, I don't feel emotionally met, so my body has learned to switch off around you to protect my heart. For many women, physical connection and emotional connection are tightly linked. If she spends the day feeling unseen and unsupported, it's very hard for her to suddenly switch into openness and desire at night. It's not that she doesn't want closeness, it's that her nervous system doesn't trust that closeness is safe anymore. When she makes small, sarcastic comments or seems colder, you might hear criticism or rejection. Inside, those moments often come from grief and disappointment. Imagine loving someone, trying many times to reach them, feeling like you're speaking a foreign language, and slowly giving up. That sharp tone, that eye roll, that distance. Underneath, there's often a very old, unspoken sentence. I wish you had come looking for me when I was still reachable. Now, let's flip it around, because this is not about making men the villain. From your side, you might have your own unspoken story. Maybe you grew up in a house where emotions were handled with jokes, work, or silence. Maybe when you did open up somewhere in your life, you were shamed or laughed at. So you built your own kind of armor. You became the problem solver, the steady one, the one who doesn't make drama. When she cried, you panicked inside, because you didn't know what to do with that intensity. So you tried to calm it down with logic. When she complained, you heard it as an attack on your effort, not as a request for connection. Your nervous system doesn't translate tears and repeated conversations as, I love you and I'm trying to reach you. It translates them as, I'm failing, I'm being criticized, I want to escape. So what she experiences as, I'm sharing my feelings so we can be closer, you may experience as, I'm being told I'm never good enough. Your defensive wall goes up. You pull away, or you go into fixing mode, or you shut down. She experiences that as emotional abandonment. She thinks, when I'm most vulnerable, he disappears or argues. The next time she hurts, she thinks twice before opening her mouth. Bit by bit, she replaces vulnerability with independence. If you've ever thought, I can't win. When I do something, it's not enough. When I say nothing, I'm cold. When I try to fix it, she says I don't understand, you're not crazy. It really can feel impossible sometimes. But this is where understanding her language matters. When she repeats the same issue, it's rarely because she enjoys conflict. In her world, repetition often means, this wound is still open, I keep touching it, hoping one day you'll really see it. When she brings up something from years ago, she's not trying to torture you, she's telling you, it never got healed. Time passed. The emotion didn't. Another important translation. Her independence is not a rejection of your value as a man. It's her attempt to stop feeling like a child begging a parent. When she stops asking for your help, she might actually be protecting herself from the humiliation of hearing no again. Whether the no is direct, or in the form of forgetfulness, distraction, or half-hearted effort. You might interpret her self-reliance as, she doesn't respect me, she doesn't need me. She might be thinking, if I don't need you, you can't disappoint me. Both of you are protecting yourselves. Both of you end up alone. If there is one big takeaway for men here, it's this: her coldness is a story, not a personality trait. It's the final chapter of many previous chapters where she felt it wasn't safe or worthwhile to stay open. You don't have to carry all the blame for that. She also has her history and her choices. But if you want to reconnect, you do have to care about the story instead of just reacting to the current chapter. And for the women listening, your withdrawal makes sense. You did what you needed to survive emotionally. But that survival pattern will not give you the relationship you secretly still want. The very armor that protected you is the same armor that keeps love from reaching you now. It's not about dropping all your defenses and becoming fragile again. It's about learning a new language together, where your strength can coexist with vulnerability, and his effort can coexist with his fear. The point of this translation is not to excuse anyone's behavior, but to help both sides see that most of this distance was built brick by brick through misread signals, unhealed hurts, and survival strategies. When you can start to hear the sentence behind the silence, the story behind the "I'm fine," the wound behind the sarcasm. That's when the door that looked sealed shut starts to open a tiny crack. Here are some harsh truths that many couples in this pattern don't want to look at, but need to, if anything is going to change. The first harsh truth is this: emotional shutdown often feels like maturity to the person doing it, but it slowly kills the relationship. When she stops complaining, stops asking, stops reacting, it can look like she's finally chilled out. Some men even think, wow, things are smoother now, less drama. But peaceful silence is not the same as peace. It's very common that what looks like, I've grown up, I'm above these emotions now, is actually, I've given up on being met, so I will live behind a polite wall. On the surface, that looks strong. Underneath, it's a quiet resignation that says, I no longer believe in us enough to fight for this. And here's the uncomfortable part for women. That resignation might protect you from disappointment, but it also blocks you from ever receiving the love and emotional presence you say you want. You can't build real intimacy with someone you've emotionally fired but still live with. The second harsh truth: many men hide behind the excuse, I'm just not emotional, to avoid the discomfort of growth. No, you do not have to become a poet, cry on command, or process feelings like your favorite therapist on Instagram. But there is a big difference between this is hard for me and this is impossible for me. A lot of women shut down after years of running into that wall. They try to explain what they need, and what they hear back is, that's just not who I am, or I don't know how to talk about feelings, full stop. What she hears underneath is, my comfort is more important than our connection. The truth is, you learned how to drive a car, how to work a smartphone, how to adapt at your job. You are capable of learning hard things. Choosing not to learn your partner's emotional language is a choice, not a fixed personality trait. That doesn't make you a monster, but it does mean you're partly responsible for the distance you're now suffering from. The third harsh truth: a lot of women use independence as a socially acceptable mask for deep resentment. It's easier to say, I'm busy, I'm focused on my career, I don't have time for emotional drama, than to say, I'm still angry that you didn't show up for me when I really needed you. That buried anger doesn't disappear. It just changes form. It shows up in sarcasm, in lack of affection, in comparison with other couples, in subtle punishment like withholding warmth or always being too tired. It can even show up as secretly hoping he'll feel how replaceable he is, so she can regain a sense of power. From the outside, this looks like a woman who's simply moved on emotionally. On the inside, it's often someone still standing in the same wound, refusing to admit how much it still hurts because that would make her feel weak. The harsh part: as long as resentment is running the show, any independence you build will have a sharp edge that cuts both of you. The fourth harsh truth: both sides can be emotionally lazy while accusing the other of not trying. Emotional laziness doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you default to whatever costs you the least discomfort. For him, emotional laziness might look like reaching for his phone instead of reaching for a hard conversation. It might look like saying, "We're fine," to avoid feeling guilty. For her, emotional laziness might look like rolling her eyes and shutting down instead of vulnerably saying, "I'm hurt and I don't know how to fix this with you." It might look like venting to friends, scrolling relationship advice, telling herself she's over it, but never actually sitting down with him and saying, "Here is the impact of our distance on me." Both people secretly want the other to make the first move, to apologize first, to be perfect at listening, to magically know how to soothe old wounds. But the reality is brutal. No one is coming to rescue this relationship for you. You either both do the uncomfortable work, or you both slowly drift into a polite, empty arrangement. Another harsh truth that stings: love does not make you a mind reader, and "if you really loved me, you just know" is a fantasy that quietly sabotages connection. Many women expect their partner to notice the tiny changes: the quieter tone, the colder hugs, the shorter answers. Many men expect their partner to know that paying bills, fixing things, staying physically present means, "I love you," even if they rarely say the words. When that unspoken expectation isn't met, both sides feel unloved. She thinks, if he cared, he'd see how tired I am. He thinks, if she cared, she'd see how hard I'm trying in my own way. But without clear words, you're both guessing. And people who are already scared and defensive will always guess in the most painful way possible. If you didn't respond the way I hoped, it must mean you don't care. The harsh truth is, if you won't speak clearly about your inner world, you are voluntarily leaving your relationship to run on assumptions. And assumptions are almost always harsher than reality. There's another piece many couples avoid. Staying in this pattern is also a choice, even if it doesn't feel like one. It's easy to point to history, to childhood, to culture and say, "This is just how I am," or "This is how men are," or "This is how marriages become after a few years." Those stories might explain why you got here, but they don't have to decide whether you stay here. The hard truth for women is that you cannot keep both your complete emotional shutdown and a deeply connected relationship. The hard truth for men is that you cannot stay emotionally illiterate and still expect to feel truly chosen, respected, and desired. You can choose to protect yourself more, or you can choose to risk connecting more. You cannot have full safety and full intimacy at the same time. There is always some risk in love. Finally, one more truth that often hurts but also frees people. Sometimes the relationship feels dead not because both of you are bad or broken, but because you've been trying to love each other using survival strategies instead of real presence. He hides behind work, distraction, and "I'm doing my best." She hides behind competence, independence, and "I'm fine." Underneath those strategies, there is usually a scared boy who doesn't want to be rejected, and a scared girl who doesn't want to be abandoned. If you keep relating from those scared parts without acknowledging them, you will keep reenacting the same cold, distant script. If you're willing to see that scaredness in yourself and in each other, then the distance between you stops being a verdict and starts being a signal. Something deep in both of you needs attention, not more armor. So what can you actually do if you recognize yourselves in this? Because understanding the pattern is useful, but if it just leaves you sitting on opposite sides of the couch feeling sad and stuck, it's not enough. You need small, practical shifts that two busy, tired adults can actually do, without needing a personality transplant. One of the most powerful shifts is to reopen a tiny channel of emotional communication in a structured, predictable way. Not "we should talk more," because that's too vague and usually ends in frustration. Think of it more like a daily check-in ritual. 10 minutes, no phones, at roughly the same time every day if possible. It can be after the kids are asleep, during a walk, or even in the car with the engine off. The rule is simple. For those 10 minutes, you're not planning, not solving logistics, not arguing about who forgot what. You each answer two questions. What kind of day did you have on the inside? And is there anything you're carrying right now that you don't want to carry alone? For him, that might mean saying more than "it was fine" and actually admitting "I'm stressed about money," or "I feel like I'm failing at work." For her, that might mean saying more than "I'm tired" and actually saying, "Today I felt invisible when everyone wanted something from me and I had nowhere to put my own feelings." You don't need perfect words. You just need to show up and try, consistently, like brushing your teeth. Another shift that helps a lot is practicing no fixing, just listening at least once a week. Choose one conversation where the goal is not to reach a solution, but to understand each other's inner world. This is especially important for men, because the instinct to fix is strong. When she shares something, your job is not to defend yourself or quickly patch the problem. Your job is to mirror back what you heard and ask gentle questions. Instead of "That's not true, I do help," try, "So when I checked my phone at dinner, it made you feel like you were alone with everything again, right?" You don't have to agree with every detail to respect the impact. For women, the shift here is to share feelings without stacking years of grievances into one massive attack. Instead of "you never support me," try, "In this specific moment, I felt unsupported, and here's why it hurt." When both of you focus on understanding the experience rather than winning the argument, the emotional temperature drops and safety slowly returns. A third practical move is to renegotiate the invisible workload in a clear, adult way. Emotional shutdown often grows in soil that feels deeply unfair. One person carries the majority of planning, remembering, noticing, and worrying. So sit down, not in the middle of a fight, but at a neutral time, and write out everything that actually happens to keep your life running. Not just cleaning or kids, but the mental tasks, tracking appointments, noticing when supplies run low, remembering birthdays, initiating hard conversations. Then, instead of blaming, ask, what would feel more balanced to you? For him, this is a chance to step up voluntarily instead of defensively, to say, "I'll take full responsibility for these specific areas so you don't have to think about them." For her, it's a chance to release control in small but real ways, to say, I'm going to let you handle this your way, even if it's not exactly how I would do it. The goal is not a perfect 50-50 split. It's a shared sense that both emotional and practical labor are seen and valued. Another useful practice is to rebuild small moments of positive connection that are not about heavy talks or problem solving. When a woman has gone into cold independence, she often doesn't trust big romantic gestures. They feel fake or temporary. What can slowly thaw her is consistent, genuine, low-pressure warmth. A 5-second kiss when you greet each other, not just a distracted, hey. A brief touch on the shoulder in the kitchen. A simple message during the day that doesn't ask for anything, just says, I thought of you when I saw this, and it made me smile. These are like small deposits into an emotional bank account that has been overdrawn for years. For her, the practice might be allowing herself to respond to these gestures instead of automatically brushing them off. Saying, thank you, instead of, too late. Letting herself enjoy a joke, a touch, a moment, even if part of her is still scared it won't last. Receptivity is also a skill. There's also deep value in naming your armor out loud. This means saying, here is how I protect myself when I'm scared, without using it as a weapon. He might say, when I feel like I'm failing you, I shut down and go quiet. It's not that I don't care, it's that I feel ashamed and I don't know what to say. She might say, when I feel like I'm alone in this, I go cold and stop sharing. It's my way of not feeling so exposed. When you can both name these patterns, they stop being invisible forces and become shared problems you can team up against. The next time he goes quiet, she can say, I see you shutting down, are you feeling like you're failing? The next time she goes cold, he can say, I feel you pulling away, did something make you feel alone again? That kind of gentle calling in interrupts the old script. For some couples, a crucial step is to agree on a repair window. You won't always get it right. There will still be sharp words, rolled eyes, missed signals. The difference between couples who slowly die and couples who slowly heal is not perfection. It's repair. A repair window might look like this agreement. If one of us feels hurt or distant, we promise to address it within 48 hours, even if it's uncomfortable. That doesn't mean you have to fully solve it in 48 hours. It means you don't let cold distance harden into ice. You can communicate the need for repair with something as simple as, I think we have a crack here. Can we talk about it tonight? It feels awkward at first, but over time, it becomes a sign of commitment, not drama. And finally, it helps to gently separate the past from the present without pretending the past didn't happen. If she has shut down, it's usually because there is a backlog of unprocessed hurt. If he has withdrawn, there's often a backlog of feeling criticized or not good enough. You cannot erase that, but you can decide, from this point forward, we are both responsible for how we show up. That might mean she takes the risk of opening a little bit, not all at once, and watches what he does with that vulnerability. It might mean he accepts that learning emotional skills will feel clumsy and uncomfortable, but does it anyway. You don't have to fix 10 years in one conversation. You just have to commit to being slightly more honest, slightly more present, slightly more brave today than you were yesterday. If there's one thing worth remembering as you sit with all of this, it's that none of us were handed a real manual for love. Most of us learned about relationships by watching imperfect adults do their best with whatever they had. Maybe you grew up with shouting and slammed doors, so now any conflict feels terrifying and you shut down. Maybe you grew up with silence, where no one ever talked about anything real, so now you either avoid hard conversations or explode because you don't know how to stay in the middle. Underneath the adult roles, husband, wife, partner, there are still very young parts of you trying to feel safe, chosen, and enough. When a woman becomes strong and independent, to the point of being emotionally unreachable, it's often that little girl inside her saying, I will never let anyone make me feel that helpless again. When a man retreats into work, screens, or jokes, it's often the little boy inside him saying, if I don't show too much, you can't laugh at me or call me weak. These are not evil intentions. They are old survival strategies. The tragedy is that two people who genuinely care about each other can end up acting like distant strangers, not because they don't love, but because they're loving from inside their armor. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself, that doesn't mean you're doomed. It means you're finally seeing the script you've been unconsciously acting out. And once a script is visible, It can be edited. Not overnight, not perfectly, and not without some discomfort, but it can be edited. The same woman who learned to shut down can learn to open in safer, slower ways, with clearer boundaries. The same man who learned to escape feelings can learn to stay in a conversation a few minutes longer, to say, "I don't know what to do right now, but I'm here," instead of disappearing. These are small shifts, but over time they change the climate of a relationship. It's also important to say this clearly. Nothing in this conversation is a reason to stay in a relationship that is abusive, degrading, or consistently unsafe. If you are being insulted, threatened, controlled, or harmed, your first responsibility is your own safety and sanity, not saving the relationship. Emotional armor in that context is not just understandable. It may be necessary. What we're talking about here are relationships where both people, underneath the hurt, still have some basic respect and care for each other, even if it's buried under layers of misunderstanding and fatigue. For everyone else, think of this not as a verdict, but as an invitation. An invitation to notice when strong and independent has secretly turned into, "I don't trust you with my heart anymore." An invitation to question the old beliefs like, "If I ask for help, I'm weak," or "If I show feelings, I'll be rejected." An invitation to wonder what might happen if, just once this week, you softened where you usually harden, or stayed present where you usually escape. You don't have to become a completely different person. You just have to be a slightly more honest one. Imagine, for a moment, a different late-night scene. The same kitchen, the same tired bodies. She turns off the light, walks past the living room, and this time, when he looks up, he says, "Hey, before you go to bed, can we sit for 5 minutes? I feel like we've been living next to each other, not with each other." Maybe she hesitates. Maybe her first instinct is to say, "I'm fine, it's late." But instead, she sits down on the edge of the couch. She doesn't pour out her whole heart. She just says, "I've been feeling very alone in this house." It's awkward. It's not a movie moment. No one says the perfect thing. But that tiny crack in the armor is where real change always starts. Your relationship doesn't need you to be flawless communicators or endlessly patient saints. It needs two humans who are willing to see their own defenses, take responsibility for their side of the wall, and learn a few new sentences in each other's emotional language. If you can do that, even clumsily, you've already shifted from quiet war to quiet rebuilding. If you heard yourself in this story, that's not a reason to feel ashamed. It's a sign that something in you is still alive enough to care. Maybe this is your moment to stop pretending that numbness is strength, and to start practicing a different kind of courage. The kind where you let yourself be seen a little more, and you choose to really see the person lying a few centimeters away from you in the dark. If you heard yourself in this story, maybe this is your invitation to stop fighting alone and start speaking honestly, even if your voice shakes.